and welcome back to the channel. This time around, for the third of the Halloween movies, I've got a bit of cyberpunk horror weirdness from 1989 in Japan. A movie that has a cult following. It was a midnight movie when I was going to midnight cinemas, and it's still kind of weirdly wonderful. It is a Japanese film called Tetsuo the Iron Man. Now, if you haven't seen this one, you got to check it out. It's on a double Blu-ray there with the sequel to it, Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer, which I haven't rewatched, and I probably will rewatch now. And there's the third sequel from 2009 called Tetsuo the Bullet Man. All of them were directed by a guy called Shinya Tsukamoto, who was kind of an avant-garde movie maker. He did a couple of smaller movies before this. And then in 1989, he did something extremely weird. It would have been 1988, so he started making it in 1988. He did something extremely weird. He was used to making 8mm films, and suddenly he's got a 16mm camera. He shot the whole thing in 16mm 3:2 aspect ratio, black and white. And it is an insane piece of cinema. It's a little hard to figure out what's going on. You get a little bit of WTF for a lot of the film until it all works itself out and explains itself. The dialogue is minimal. It's mostly told with images, and the images are striking. It's got some good industrial music by Ishikawa Chu, and it is just a totally unique piece of cinema for me. There's nothing else like Tetsuo the Iron Man. Now, this isn't to be mistaken for the 2008 Iron Man or the one from the early 1950s. This is a thing in its own. The black and white photography is sometimes very high contrast. It's got a unique look to it. Now, the story is a little hard to kind of nail down, but I'll give it a go. I'll give you at least part of it without doing too many spoilers. At first, we see a guy who's a metal fetishist, and he is inserting a steel pipe into his thigh because he wants to be metallic. And so we see him doing that, which is a bit icky. He actually uses a pocket knife to slit his own leg open and put in the pipe. Now, the odd thing about it is, it's this pocket knife. It's called a higarokami. It's a standard Japanese pocket knife, and I got a real buzz when I saw that they were using it in this movie. Now, that's my everyday carry knife, but just leaving aside my knife collection, he cuts his leg open, puts the pipe in there, bandages it up, and comes back to it later and finds out that he's got maggots on it. Yeah, not pretty, but inevitable. So he goes staggering into traffic and gets hit by a car. Then we cut to a salaryman, a kind of Japanese corporate drone kind of guy, who is shaving himself in preparation for work, and finds a steel spike projecting out of his cheek. He tries to get rid of it, and it bleeds, so he's somehow caught some kind of virus which is slowly turning his whole body to metal. They have a nice chase thing, a bit of body horror there. And then he goes to a train station to go to work, and there's a woman sitting next to him who sees something metallic on the ground. It's kind of metallic and slightly organic, and she doesn't quite know what it is. She touches it with a pencil, and it does the thing like... you remember the original Blob where the guy pokes through jelly with a stick and it goes up his hand? This is what this thing does. And turns her into a rampaging metallic human monster that chases the salaryman around. We don't actually know what's going on for a lot of this movie. We then see the salaryman in his apartment with his girlfriend, and it just gets weirder from there. I'm not going to go any further with it. I don't want to spoil it for you. You should check this one out, definitely. The interesting thing is, crazy low budget. I'll tell you about the production, which is even weirder than the movie is. The director and the crew shot most of it, apart from the location scenes, in the director's apartment. Now, Japanese apartments, particularly for avant-garde directors in the 1980s, are not large. And he shot most of it in his apartment over 18 months. The whole production went for 18 months. They kept losing and hiring new crew. The actors were a bit frustrated by it all. There was just insanity going on with this movie, and I'll explain why it took so long to produce it in a moment. So eventually it got to the stage where all the crew were leaving, and the movie was completed by just the director and the actors. The actors who weren't on screen were running the lights and the sound. The director was running the camera, and yeah, it was a dog's breakfast of a production. But the reason it took so long is there's a lot of stop motion animation in this movie using live human beings. To show the spread of the virus, they've got to do stop motion. They used a whole bunch of latex rubber and also parts from discarded television sets and industrial tubing and all sorts of other weird and wonderful things to make the idea of a man slowly being taken over by metal real. Well, not real, but on the screen. Eventually the story comes around and we see the metal fetishist again, who has become a kind of cybernetic god who can turn anything into metal. He and Tetsuo have a fight, and it's just a crazy movie. It is transgressive. It's got a lot of body horror, which fortunately, because of the black and white photography, isn't as gross as it would be were it filmed in colour. And most of all, the movie is a triumph of imagination over the limitations of budget and resources. The fact that they filmed it mostly in one apartment, apart from the location shots, is amazing. And the transgressive weirdness of it, there are some sexual things that go on in this movie which you probably haven't seen in another film, and if you have, it was probably influenced by Tetsuo, the Iron Man. But yeah, it's not one to put on when the kids are around, because they will have nightmares and you'll have to take them to therapy. But leaving that aside, it is really a fun film to revisit. The music, the industrial music, is relentless. There's a lot of kind of percussion on pieces of metal and things like that, so it's definitely got a whole vibe there in the soundscape. And it is, the acting of course is over the top. As I said, there's absolutely nothing like this film. So just to summarise, I've actually written out a summary because I got more organised than I normally do with these kind of rambling reviews. It's got a unique look with the stop motion. They also do hyperlapses. Now, if you don't know what hyperlapses is, you can do a little bit of a search on YouTube and see how people are using hyperlapse in modern times using more technologically advanced cameras than they had in 1989. It's a proto-cyberpunk film. Now, I was a big cyberpunk fan in the 80s. I met William Gibson. I did all of the cyberpunk fanboy things. I read every novel that came out that I could in the genre, and I'm still a big fan of it as well, even though it kind of has ebbed a little bit. I haven't played the game yet. I don't know if the game's out yet, the Cyberpunk 2040, whatever it is. But I'm kind of tempted to get that game, though. Playing computer games these days sucks up so much of your time. You haven't got time for YouTube videos, and I'd rather do YouTube videos. But anyway, the concepts in the movie have an escalating insanity. You go with a guy who's a metal fetishist sticking the rod in his leg, to more weirdness, more madness, more insanity, until it reaches a crescendo after the battle between Tetsuo and the metal fetishist. And I like that escalation of insanity of concept. It really does work tremendously well in the film. But apart from that, stay with the movie. Yeah, it kind of, you don't know what's going on for a lot of it. There's a whole bunch of WTF in this movie, and you kind of want to know what it is, so stick with it. Some people I know have started to watch it and then dropped out. I don't recommend you do that. Stay with it. Go, lean into it. Go for the ride, and it will ultimately reward you. It really is a weirdly wonderful movie. And finally, there is a lesson in this movie, which is don't touch weird things on train platforms. It will not end well. So that's it for this time around. I enjoyed watching this movie, and I enjoyed talking about it as well. If you like the channel, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell notification. You can also support the channel by going to patreon.com/paleocinema. And for as little as $1 US per month, you can support the channel. Watch some good, weird Japanese movies, and there are a ton of them. Watch good movies, watch bad movies, watch Tetsuo the Iron Man. Definitely, I recommend you do that. And be safe. Wear a mask, follow the science. So take care of yourselves. I'll be back in a few days with a fourth movie. I don't know which one I'm going to pick yet, but it's going to be different. And I'll see you next time.